Hi everyone, welcome back to the Watch Insider. My name is Brian. This is Tim.
I'm Dayglow Tim for today with my favorite sweater.
And thank you guys for logging on. So we have what I hope is a great show tonight. Some really cool watches for you guys to look at. Some great discussion. We're going to answer some questions. And it should be a lot of fun with Dayglow Tim.
Yes, and in honor of my Dayglow sweater, I've brought my favorite Dayglow French architect and watchmaker. We have an Elaine Silberstein Bolito. More on that in a moment, folks, but I definitely wanted to tease the wackiest watch to match my wackiest shirt.
I love that for you wearing like a normal sweater is like wacky now.
Yeah, this is my wackiest
We're slowly getting him dressed up, folks.
Okay, moving on. We've got a great program for today.
So first, why don't we do a quick wrist check?
Definitely.
Then we can do talk about some of these watches on the table.
Well, you guys know me. I love Jaeger-LeCoultre, I love Aston Martin, I love cars in general. So a chronograph designed expressly for folks who love cars. Whether you're racing them or not, the Amvox 2 chronograph with its articulated case trigger for the chronograph system is absolutely genius. 11 years later, this still looks and feels fresh, and I guarantee you, if it said Richard Mille at 6 o'clock instead of Jaeger-LeCoultre, you'd be paying 6 figures for it. Absolute favorite watch among my chronographs, and that includes the Duomet.
That would also look cool in a different color strap. I feel like that could be on rubber just as nicely.
Yeah, when they originally came out with these, I could show you that one more time. They had a Bridge of Weir strap.
Is there like is there like a waffle rubber strap that they make for it, like with holes in it?
That was the DBS that came after.
Yeah.
The Bridge of Weir is the same leather used in Astons, but the DBS strap is leather and textile, and it just looks more butch. I think it's generally the preference, but I like this one because it's soft.
So I have on the wrist today, sweater, we've got here a VB2, also known as the FP Journe Vagabondage 2. So this is the second iteration of the watch, but the first that was done in rose gold. I will take this off, give it to Tim for the macro shot. So beautiful watch. It's the Jump Hour, the latest version of the watch being the Jump Second, which is absolutely phenomenal. I think that we've had that on the show before, but here you have the Jump Hour with a Jump Minute. The watch is absolutely spectacular. I really like, there's purple accents there on the, they're not screws.
They're pivot jewels.
They're the pivot jewels. So they're a little bit more purple than red, which I really like about the watch. I don't know if that's a quirk of the VB or perhaps just this particular example of the watch. But the watch is great. I've got a couple nicks and whatnot on there, but I think for most of my watches, this is probably considered pretty good shape.
This is your personal watch?
It's not, but I'm taking it for a test.
I was going to say, it's rare to see a Brian Goffberg watch that doesn't look like it went ice spelunking with James Bond, but all the same.
Yeah, so great watch, straightforward, easy to read. This is a watch that you had to have in order to be allocated the Vagabondage 3. And as a result, I think that this watch has actually gained a lot more attention of late and is now probably even rivaling the third iteration of the watch. So, it brought a lot more notice to the Vagabondage line in general, and, I'm just loving this thing.
Only 69 of these made. They made 68 in platinum, 69 in rose gold, and amazingly, it's for exactly the reason you think. Someone in the Journe organization had a favorite naughty number, and thus that was the basis for making one more in rose gold than in platinum. What a piece. What a watch. Guys, can we jump back to the dial shot real quick?
So you can see that purple on there, which
Boom,
is like super
there it
cool.
goes. Man, I don't know. I think I'm gonna borrow this one.
Yeah, take it for a spin.
Yikes. We're gonna be doing long-term watch reviews on my reviews channel soon, guys. Watch this space, or actually, I should say, watch that space. Okay.
So we've got some great choices from the vault today. I decided to bring 3 or 4 watches that come in at under the $5,000 price point that I think are really cool, fun watches, off the beaten path, I guess, a little bit that not everybody would sort of expect. So, no Rolex here, but just some fun watches that I hope you guys enjoy. So I'm going to start things off with a bang. This right here is a Tag Heuer Monaco limited edition that was done for the Automobile Club of Monaco. So you've got here an all-black PVD-coated case. You've got that sort of punctured leather strap, I guess it's calfskin. It would be
Yeah.
calfskin.
The interesting thing is the original versions always came with some sort of 1970s style synthetic that always looked and felt disappointing in person. So all of the re-editions and tributes have come with the real thing, calfskin. Like Brian says, it feels better, it looks better, and believe it or not, it lasts longer than the synthetic. And for me today, Tag Heuer is a luxury brand, whereas in the 60s and 70s, you could have perhaps poised it as more of a utility watch or practical implement. The calfskin's appropriate, and so is the build quality of this one. I have to be honest, although it's not the fabled Caliber 11, it's a lot tougher. Those Caliber 11s are finicky things.
Yeah, and we spoke a little bit about the Dark Lord last week, which is one of the most collectible Tag Heuers that are made. So you obviously can see the inspiration notes that came from that watch. What I also really like about this watch is that it's a limited edition that they did that doesn't scream limited edition. The only thing that you have is that sort of coat of arms on the back that's printed on the sapphire crystal that really, lets you know that it's, limited to a particular organization or was for a particular organization. But nonetheless, I just think that the watch was beautifully executed, and it's a watch that certainly could, that they could come back out with now in a different edition that would do great. But I think that this is one of those Tag Heuer pieces that, that's great to have in any collection, and it's still, undervalued in the marketplace.
And you get a full clasp, a deluxe feature for a watch that's quite accessibly priced.
Moving on, next piece, we have we'll do the Tudor Black Bay Bronze. So Tudor Black Bay Bronze, 43 millimeters, bronze case, aluminum bezel. Everybody that's watching this show should know what the Black Bay is. If not, this is sort of the, call it, centerpiece of Tudor's current product offering. So the color of the bronze is similar to that what you would expect of any bronze watch. What's beautiful though is that sort of brown aluminum bezel, which will patina over time, and that's one of the reasons why I absolutely love the Black Bay watches. Is they could have just as easily gone with ceramic, but they went with aluminum so that it shows wear and it'll show age and it'll age nicely.
I will also say this, the specific bronze alloy that Tudor used with this watch, which came out at Baselworld 2016, by the way. So all the pre-owned examples you see are still under warranty. But the nice thing about this particular bronze is that there are things you can do to accelerate its patina and its aging, but because it has a very high aluminum content and is designed out of the gate to age minimally, if you wear it responsibly and don't sweat like a pig all over it, it's not going to age like a Panerai PAM 382. You get to decide effectively how much or how little your bronze watch will patina, and that's a consequence of the alloy that Tudor uses to make the bronze. It's also a big, bold Heritage Black Bay. 43 millimeters, it's large on the wrist.
Mm-hmm. And that brown is like, it's not a prototypical brown. It's like a brownish black, which I really like, and I like the option because, for me personally, brown is like a major commitment to make on a watch. I think that it's not as transitional as even a black, a silver, or a white, even a blue. So I think that brown's definitely a commitment, and with a dial like this that verges on black, I think that it makes the watch a lot more wearable with a lot more different things.
I'll also say this, guys. Remember, this is in-house caliber, 70-hour power reserve, COSC chronometer. It's got the silicone hairspring. It's built like a Rolex movement with a free-sprung balance and a full balance bridge. So this is a tough watch. This is not a bronze watch you need a baby. Let me give a quick shout-out to our friends who are joining us from around the world. Eddie Landsberg, first by far. Lavishly Fat, welcome. I appreciate your self-deprecation, or maybe it's just honesty. Andrew Holt, Shannon, welcome. AH, David Cahill, Steve Pesco. I can see Thumper JDM, John Tsai, Matt Forster, Tom Hung, Eric Cecil. Welcome, guys. All right, let's take some questions live from the chat
Real
box.
quick on JBO Surf's comment, I just want to sort of agree with you wholeheartedly that the Bucher edition is probably the nicer iteration of the two, and I can only hope that they should come out with that watch. Like, for broad appeal. Like I never understand the decision to making a watch like that and have it be so difficult for people to get, because I just think that like you could sell so many more.
It's true. Bucherer may be the largest watch vendor in Switzerland, but stateside, I mean, we're hurting for that blue. Come on, guys. Tudor, you're the only company that hasn't embraced blue as a pandering sop to the market. Indulge us, please.
Yeah, and especially in a watch like that, like I can understand doing a limited or something along those lines with a store or with a different market, but on a watch like that where it's like, okay, let's say you did a limited green, I get it, but on something that is such a almost iconic color and you don't have something like that in your collection, it just seems like it's a no-brainer. Like it's like if anything, it annoys people.
The weird thing is that they did the Heritage Chrono Blue before blue was a thing, and now that blue is a thing and it's maybe done to death, Tudor's not really doing it.
It's pretty much like I feel like in like the design like rooms of the brands now, it's sort of like what watch can we take and just put a blue dial on it, and it's like this one.
It's like during the 2000s, the thing was like, what can we put a tourbillon? Okay, a dive watch.
Jaeger's True Second blue though is nice.
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
It's nice. I mean, you know, I think that the watch I think caught a little bit of a you know, a blip in the market. You know, and you know, ultimately, I think that the blue limited to 100 pieces should do very well.
I would also say this, kind of lightning in a bottle. You look at it and you think, you know, this is what it should have been from the beginning.
Yeah.
So I would say between the two Richemont 100-piece online boutique exclusives this year, Jaeger LeCoultre 1, Panerai 0. I'm liking the JLC more than I like the 731, but they're both good. All right, here's a question from Clive. Was blue once not a thing? What color was the sky then? Well, I'll tell you this. They used to make you pay for blue. I have a Grand Memovox from 2001 that was part of a JLC commemorative set, 250 pieces of each model, but each model was in platinum. To get the blue dial, you had to pay big. In general, blue has always been reserved for an upscale, fully optioned model, so you usually see it in white gold or you usually see it in platinum. What's new today is that blue's on everything, every genre,
blue's also
and every
synonymous
metal.
with limited editions, and it's synonymous with boutique pieces. So I think that you have AP in particular transitioned all their blue dials to being boutique only. You have blue being a very important dial color for platinum Pateks that goes back a long time.
True.
You've got
It goes back to the French monarchy,
exactly.
Bourbon blue.
I mean, it's you know, it's, and again, that sort of then trickles down and translates to a lot of other watches. So when people come to associate, you know, the hardest to get watches, the AP Jumbo, the 5711 as blue dial pieces, that then sends the message for other watches that have blue dials that they hope to steal a little bit of that thunder,
We have a great question from Sebastian R. Sebastian's asking, what is the heaviest watch out there? I'm going to come out and say it's probably the 42mm Royal Oak Offshore full bracelet. This is a watch that's new over the last year. It has a beautiful...
The platinum.
It has a beautiful gradient dial.
Yeah. So it's the platinum
have it,
variation of the
don't we?
watch. I believe we just took one in, but it's all platinum. I mean, it's crazy.
Watch you want, or it's not watch you want, it was watch you want.
Box.
It's watch box. Watch you want is now watch box. Keeps ticking his watch box. Come on, know it, Tim. Bottom line is
It's your slogan.
Watchbox watch reviews will have the triumphant return of What's It Weigh. We haven't had it since Florida. It's coming back, folks, and that's going to be our debut heavyweight contender. I'd be shocked.
We got to
if
bring
that
back
doesn't
What
take
Does It Weigh?
What does it weigh?
What does it
Absolutely.
weigh?
That was a popular feature. Hodinkee copied that. That's how good it was. All right, guys. Moving along. Let's go with super color. Let's go with crazy color.
Fine, we're gonna bring out the Elan Silverstein.
From about 1988 to 2012, Alain Silberstein, a Frenchman who started as an architect and became a watch brand chieftain, built his own crazy, quirky watches. Now, while they generally had a sort of Mondrian-esque color scheme, they were not pure primary colors. You can see that those hands are almost like a Riviera blue. The chronograph seconds hand looks all sorts of crazy, warped, almost like a wave in space, with a signal yellow worthy of a airfield ambulance. Everything about these watches was nutty, kind of a blend of Mondrian-esque de style with Dadaism. The watches were all distinctive, and you can see this watch, the Bolito Chrono, powered by a Frederic Piguet 1185 automatic column wheel vertical clutch chronograph, was one of the largest watches of the 1990s. Though it's only 46 millimeters lug to lug and 34 millimeters across, you know what? This This was compared with the Panerai Luminor and the Royal Oak Offshore back in the day when big watches really were not a thing. And it was crazy with huge Broncard-style flanks, that wonderfully distorting cambered crystal, and then these wonderful hinge lugs. The watch was made in France. And I would have to say, if ever a watch exuded a French sensibility, it's this thing. These are collectible watches now. I feel someday, partly because Alain Silberstein is coming back into style, and partly because he was ahead of his time, these will be collectible watches. Ask MBNF about that one.
No, I mean, I think it's wickedly cool, and I think that this is the sort of the watch when a known watch guy is wearing the watch, it's like, oh my God, that's so cool. And if a guy is not a watch guy wearing the watch, they're like, what the hell is he wearing? So I agree with you that I think that he was way too ahead of his time. I think that with the influence that art is now having on the watch market and how they're sort of converging and mixing a lot more now, that the influence that he had will, I think, start translating into more pieces, and he should be doing many more collaborations with people. Like there should be an Alain Silberstein, Hublot.
Yes.
We're talking about that. Him doing a watch with FP Journe would be bonkers amazing.
They're both French. It makes sense. And FP Journe is not a stuck-in-the-mud traditionalist. He does crazy things. Holland and Holland, that's your reference. I'll also say this. Something like the Richard Mille Cyril Congo would be absolutely crazy. The RM68 Cyril Congo. That could be done with Alain Silberstein. Richard Mille is a Frenchman. Alain Silberstein is a Frenchman. Please, fate, make this happen.
Yeah, I mean, this thing is awesome. Now, he has a lot of other, obviously, watches. It's not just this case. I would probably sooner, prefer, a round watch. But, I mean...
That thing's like a Reverso tripping on acid.
Yeah, I mean, it is awesome. And again, this isn't something that would be an everyday wear. But, to be able to whip this thing out every once in a while, I think it's pretty great.
And it's a chronograph, guys. King of complications. I'll also say this about Alain Silberstein. Some of the watches that he made that were grand complications are so undervalued right now, it's almost comical. In the recent spate of Far Eastern auctions from Phillips and Christie's, we saw a flying tourbillon with a 70-hour power reserve and a mother-of-pearl dial with hand painting go for under $20,000, 40 millimeters in titanium. It's crazy, but it's not oversized, and it is undervalued. Get them while you can.
And to answer El Señor Jesus, I embrace that I say, probably every 4 words. So we will play a drinking game at some point with all my idiosyncrasies, and we will be on the floor.
Yeah, it's going to be low percentage stuff, though. We want the show to make it to at least 20 minutes.
I don't think it'll make it that long.
All right, moving on. Why don't we go from one of my crazy watches to one of your value propositions? And
okay.
Let's go for the brass ring.
So we will go for we have here the Grand Seiko Spring Drive Snowflake watch. So this is the second iteration of the watch. And, what separates this watch from the first variation is, number one, you've got the removal of Seiko completely from the dial, and it's solely Grand Seiko. So this was an extremely big transition for the brand. I don't think that anybody else in the world actually understands why it was a big transition, but for them it was huge. So, Grand Seiko now stands on its own right. It's treated as its own brand and not just sort of a tributary of the larger Seiko line. You've got here an all titanium case. The dial, mimics what, call it snow melt on a mountain. You've got your power reserve indicator there at the bottom left, and you've got the amazing spring drive movement in the back, which Tim will talk a little bit more about. So overall, the watch is honestly effing awesome. I can't say enough good things about Grand Seiko and all of the good things that they're doing right now. The only thing that I cross my fingers and hope is that they continue to keep product tight, because like with anything else, once something catches fire a little bit here in the States, you blink your eyes and next thing you know, they're everywhere. So the only thing that I can really hope is that they keep the market tight and that they keep supply and demand in check.
Now, guys, the romance of this watch is not just in that gorgeous dial. Now, of course, in northern Japan where it snows and the snow tends to accumulate and stay, unlike the periodic swaths of gross brown stuff we get in Philadelphia, they have this lovely textured, fluffy sort of topography to the snowfall. And that's exactly what inspired the dial of this SBGA 211 reference. Now, as beautifully textured as that is, it kind of belies the complexity of the fabrication process. 9 separate steps go into creating that texture, and it's a combination of metal treatments. It's a combination of lacquering. It features mechanical distressing of the surface. It's very impressive, and that's before you even get to the hand-finished indices as well as Dauphines at center. They're beautifully satin grained on their tops and beveled with polish on their flanks. Grand Seiko dials are state-of-the-art. They are literally the best in the business. There are some that come close, there are some that even match, but I'm not sure that anyone does better. And this isn't even the most complex dial they make, to say nothing of what's available from Crador. This is a special watch, and all in titanium, hand-finished and optically flawless. This is what's known as their Zaratsu case finish, and if we can get a flanking shot, you can get a good sense
It's incredible. And you know, they use the highest grade titanium that you can use in a wristwatch, which really almost lets it resemble steel in a way.
And also, it is harder than steel, and it's tougher to scratch. Plus, light on the wrist and 100 meters water resistant, this is the only watch you'll ever need. With Spring Drive, it combines the romance of a watchmaker assembled and regulated mechanical movement driven by a spring with a 3-day power reserve and the precision of a quartz oscillator. This is quite literally a unique piece. There's nothing else like it in the world.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, the biggest thing that Seiko's had to overcome, you know, where obviously you guys are all sort of chatting about it right now in the chat, is the name itself and what Seiko's sort of, you know, the connotation that it has here in the US. And they're slowly overcoming that hurdle, and I think they went about it the perfect way. They targeted watch guys. And I think that had they just tried to go after broad appeal, it would have failed. But by going after watch guys and focusing on collectors and keeping things really tight for a long time, I think that they let it sort of spread organically. They got them on wrists. They got watch guys looking at the watch, holding it in their hands, and really having that sort of understanding of what the watch really is. And then after that, as more people started wearing it, they then started letting it circulate a little bit more to then, you know, get it to the next group of people.
And it really is a matter of getting the right people to wear your watches. We were talking about this Elaine Silberstein Bolito Chrono, and how if a hardcore celebrity watch guy showed up wearing this thing at like a watch time event or SIHH, it would be a sensation, and all of a sudden you wouldn't be able to buy them for under $5,000. They would be $15,000 watches instantly. Like if this thing showed up on the wrist of William Messina, it would be over. We wouldn't be able to offer this one for like $49 and change.
Yeah, I mean, if John Mayer put that watch on, you would have 4,000 fanboys wearing them on like every wrist, their ankle, like,
NATO straps.
Yeah, you know,
NATO
it'd
straps
be like a blue
Mondrian
strap
colors.
wrapping like 9 times around the wrist.
Oh, these are so divine, they would write on the blogs. Are you listening, people? All right, so here's a question from Stephen Trong. He's asking, should I purchase a Habring Foudroyant directly from Richard and Maria themselves? The price is right, the company's solid, and they're nice folks. I don't see why not. Unless you want to get one pre-owned and pay a little bit less. It's a great relationship to have, I think.
Yeah.
And, you know, what are they going to make? 125 watches a year? You're always going to have a personal relationship with the company. They're one of only, like, 2 watch brands that are in Austria. And Richard Habring is a blue chip name, and Maria increasingly, too. So why not? The only real alternative from a relationship and volume perspective would be something like Oxen Jr., and then they're not offering you a Foudroyant. Okay, so here's a question from Anthony G. He's commenting, actually, that the Snowflake, he wishes it were smaller in diameter. It wears between a 41 and a 42. Let me just assure you that you should still try the watch, and you should try it maybe on a strap. It's in titanium and really light. So if the size doesn't work for you, give the weight a chance to. It might be the watch you like best on a strap, and you might have more success with it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a very small wrist. Yeah, me and Tim, you know, we both have small wrists, and like I'll hold it up here because it's not size, but I mean, you should be able to see right here. It's not overly large on my wrist. It's, you know, and with the titanium, it's extraordinarily light, so it's almost as if nothing's there. I definitely wouldn't say that this watch is too big by any means. And then, and as I look at it more now, I mean, you even have high polish on the edges of the links themselves. I mean, this you can tell that a lot of time went into just the refinishing process of this watch.
Yeah, definitely. They're great watches, guys. Even at list price, the value is there. And I would say, honestly, if you can buy one pre-owned a few months old, that's like the best of all possible worlds. Okay, so question coming in from Trevor Phillips asking, what is the best watch to wear with a black BMW 4 Series coupe? Okay, let's just pretend we're talking about the M4 here. I'm going to go... I don't think you can go wrong with the steel ceramic Daytona. Black on black, black ceramic, black dial. That's a motorsports-inspired watch, and frankly, BMW has always raced some production variant of its road cars. The M3, now M4, has had many glorious escapades on the track in FIA GT, the Grand Am, later the WeatherTech Series, and the American Le Mans in the United States. I would say you can't go wrong with the Daytona, but the new Girard-Perregaux Laureato ceramic in black would look pretty bitchin'.
Answering a couple questions from the chat, they're asking for my wrist size. I want to say I'm a 6 3/4 to a 7, somewhere right in between there. What are you? I mean, I honestly, I've watched 4,000 of your videos, so I should know what size wrist you are.
16 centimeters.
Yeah.
16. But let me show you something. This is a 44 millimeter watch, guys. It's a 44 millimeter watch that I happen to think wears well because it's light in titanium and the lugs are very short cropped. It's not the size of the case, guys. It's the shape and the span of the lugs. That's why I always give lug to lug measurement in my videos. And this one I want to say is right about 50. Lightweight, short lugs, wears nice. Try before you buy.
So, Eddie Landsberg, answering your question, you know what? I think that it's really just personal preference. I think that for a watch being too big or too small, really just comes down to what you wear regularly and what you feel like the size is. If you're used to wearing really big watches and then you go from a 44 to a 36, you're going to think that the 36 is too small. If you regularly wear a 38 or a 36 and then you put on a 44, you're going to think that it's too big. So, you know, I think that trends play a very big role in it. You know, vintage is in now. A lot of people are wearing vintage Daytonas, tags, Longines. So a lot of those watches are 33 to 35 millimeters in size, even a little bit bigger than that. So, you know, as vintage comes in, watches, you know, on wrists get a little bit smaller, and people then sort of use that as what should be the right size of a watch, and then 44 ends up looking too big. So for me, watches that were too big, I always felt I was wearing like somebody else's watch.
Okay.
Like, you know, if I was wearing like a 44 to a 46, it almost felt like I was wearing my dad's watch. And I know that that's really weird, but it's sort of like, it just felt big. It didn't really feel right on the wrist, which is why I've always gravitated more towards like 42 to 36.
See, I always thought of like dad's watch and grandpa's watch as being the one that's like, you know, grandpa's watch is the size of your thumbnail, and like dad's watch is the size of your thumb, because they lived in an era when men didn't wear like 50 millimeter watches. But I would say this, in terms of size, there are two things. First, there's the look that doesn't appear right, and that's going to be subjective, but the watch has to look right to you. That's fundamental.
Yeah, it's number one.
And then there's the actual fit. Eyes closed, does it still make sense? Because some folks are going to say, believe it or not, they're going to say, okay, this fits, but once it's sized for them and it's strapped down, it does not feel right. It might be too heavy. It might be too light. You might not like the fact that it fits, but the lugs stick out and you can feel them over the edge of your wrist. So it has to feel right. It has to look right. And again, one of the things that we do at Watchbox is we give you the chance to have a 7-day no questions asked return, because whether you're buying in person or buying online, you need a chance to put it on the wrist, decide you like it, and return it if you don't. No questions asked.
Exactly. And you know what? The millimeter size is, I don't want to call it subjective because it's a measurement, but a sub's always been 40 millimeters. But if you hold up a new sub versus a sub from 15 years ago, you'd say that they're two different watches. So, you know, I think that just getting the watch on your wrist is number one. Number two, if you're wearing a watch, at the end of the day, it's really what you like. If you feel like the watch looks good and it feels right, then it's right. If somebody says that the watch seems too big or too small, like F them. Like
absolutely.
F that. Like, you know what? It's a personal choice. You know, I'm sure that I wear watches all the time that somebody would say, you know, probably looks a little bit small, but, you know, what do they know?
And don't try to wear a watch to cultivate an image as a connoisseur, because there are watches you're going to like because they're like a guilty pleasure. Don't let them be so guilty that you're afraid to wear them. Like, I've got my JLC Master Compressor Extreme World Alarm. It literally looks like JLC's response to the Hublot Big Bang and the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore. It's almost 47 millimeters. It's huge. It's a product of the 2000s excess. And people have said, Tim, I thought you were a connoisseur and you like them. I love that watch. It's big, stupid, and blue, and fun. And memorable because it was my first JLC. I'm never going to let someone else's opinion of what I should be dictate what I know in my heart to be right or wrong.
Yeah, and you know what? When watch cases were getting bigger, when the 41 millimeter Royal Oak came out, you know, I'll be the first person to say I put one on my wrist and I wanted it, right? Like I wanted to want it, I guess is the right way to say it. But it just didn't fit right. It fit bigger than a 41 on me. And I think it fits bigger than a 41 because of the lug. So no matter how I looked at it, it just felt big and felt wrong, even though I really wanted the watch and I knew that like that was the new size. And I gravitated back towards the 39 because that was the right look for me, the right size, and I could not be happier that I stuck with what I originally had.
And here's the thing, guys. There's this famous story from the 1950s. I guess it says more about American culture than perhaps anything else, but there is kind of universality to it. A man who just made it in business went out and he bought himself a Cadillac. His neighbor came over and said, "You're not a Cadillac man. You've got the money, but you're not a Cadillac man." And in shame, the man slinked back to the dealer and traded it for a Buick.
Where do you get these anecdotes from?
Don't be that guy. That's the message. Don't be that Cadillac guy. If you want a style and you can afford it and you feel it, go for it.
I love that.
So Trevor Phillips, my final suggestion, because I'm looking for something that's motorsports themed and fits a black M4, Omega Dark Side of the Moon. You can get them pre-owned for way
like
less
$7
than
grand,
retail.
I think.
Yeah, like $7 and it'll look the part.
So that's all that we have for From the Vault today. Maybe we'll talk about, we have a few more on the table, but I want to get to the rest of the show. So something that I wanted to talk about a little bit is, obviously we have the holidays coming up. Lots of people are buying watches, and just a little bit what's going on in the market now with different brands.
Yes.
So a lot of the guys from, the chat and call it everywhere else in the watch world, are consistently asking now more and more about the same models. And what really led me to want to talk about this tonight is I had a conversation today with a viewer who's watching right now, but I'm not going to call it his name unless he would want me to, who is or looking at or thinking about an H. Moser Pioneer watch. And beautiful watch. We've talked about Moser here on the show before. The finishing is great. The brand's doing better than, I think it's doing better than anybody would have expected.
It's one of the few companies that had double-digit growth in the apocalyptic watch year of 2016.
Exactly. And you know what? It's surprisingly really good value for what you're spending. But what's happened now with transparency in the market and with more and more people sort of having an understanding of pre-owned watches, what they're selling for, what they can sell them for, and easy access to seeing that information, is everybody's gravitating towards the same watches. And more people now are gravitating towards, we've talked about it, Patek Philippe, the Nautilus and Aquanaut line, AP, the Royal Oaks.
Especially the older steel 39mm Royal Oaks.
Exactly, 39, the current 41s, the 15400s. You've got
the new Chronos.
The new Chronos. Rolex is absolutely crazy. I think we have I have a picture of a pre-owned regular Rolex sub with a date up online right now. Can we blow that up real quick so everybody can see? Pre-owned, I think it's being advertised as new for $97.50. A basic sub right now selling for over $1,000 over retail.
You mean it wasn't even worn by Vladimir Putin?
It was not even worn by Vladimir Putin. So this, I think, is what's happening is that everybody is now sort of has that sort of view that, the brands have trained that watches are investments. And while we try and say, like, listen, guys, these aren't investments, they're going to depreciate, and certain watches will depreciate slower than others, everybody now wants to buy the watches that'll depreciate the least. And what's happened is they've sort of gone online, done their research. Everybody from the forums on down sort of points them in the direction of these watches that either sell at retail or for over retail. So everybody now goes, and that's the watches that they want.
Yes.
And as a result of that, the brands were already playing that sort of supply and demand, game with the artificial supply and demand. So you now have everybody that's running towards the same 15 watches. Everybody wants them. The brands have slowed down the delivery of these watches, which has caused prices to skyrocket.
Yes.
And as a result, people are forgetting about other brands. And I think now you're seeing these other brands
like
now,
Moser.
Like Moser, for example, coming out with, let's call it the Steel Pioneer at a great price point, but they're now delivering them slowly. So in the past, this would have been a watch that would have been regularly available, probably at most retailers upon launch. But now they've created a little bit of a wait list, and they're really trying to, probably play the same game that, that the other brands are playing, and, rightful course. But I think that you have, we've already heard that the new Zenith Defy Lab, which is absolutely awesome that I have the picture right here. This was the one that was created.
I can even do better than that. I've got the watch time.
Oh, beautiful.
I got a huge picture of it.
So this was a watch that was created where they flew over the recipients of the watches over to Switzerland. They only made one of each different color variation. They're coming out with the watch in, I want to say, like a $7,000 to $8,000 price point. We've already been told that every retailer is just getting one, and that Zenith is going to keep the watch extremely tight. They don't want you to be able to get the watch, which honestly I think is awesome. Like, that's what you want when you're buying a watch like this. You want scarcity. You want to feel like if you get it that it's, that it is a win. And over time, I think that you'll see them selling a little bit more slowly and releasing a few into the market. But in the beginning, that's exactly what you should do.
So here's the question. There was talk initially after the first 12 were sold at grand prices that the ultimate production model would be reasonably priced. Have they been bold and priced it accessibly, albeit with very strict control of supply? Like, is it going to be a $12,000 watch that you have to apply to get?
Which piece?
The production version of the Defy Lab after the first 12.
No, I think it's only going to be like $7,000.
Okay.
I think it's like $7,000 to $8,000.
I like that though, because they're not saying this will be scarce because it's too expensive for anyone to buy it.
No, it's going to be scarce because they're going to make it scarce. And you know what? What we've learned is that it really only takes a few good launches to bring a brand back. Tudor, it was three watches. It was the Pelagos, it was the Black Bay, and it was the Heritage Chrono.
Yeah.
And those three watches brought the brand back, and it's still keeping the brand going. So I think what we've learned is that a watch like, you've got the Defy Lab, you've got the Defy that came out last year.
Yeah, the Defy 21.
The Defy 21, and one more really good watch, and I think people, not only is Zenith back, but I think one more really good watch, and people are going to start saying that Zenith is back. And more than anything else, when you have a watch like that everybody wants, that's really hard to get, it then trickles down to the other watches in the line. So obviously, they used to keep the Daytona extremely tight because it then brought, all boats rise. And I think that that's probably something that's now being done, by most brands. But, AP, for example, they're limiting their distribution. They just closed or are closing 2 retailers in New York, multiple retailers overseas. You've got 15400s, which is this watch right here. I mean, the Blue Dial's now selling for $19,000 to $20,000, which is thousands over wrist.
That's a model, the Blue Dial. There have been a lot of questions about this. It's generally reserved for your absolute top tier authorized dealers and boutiques. You rarely see that one at just a general AP door. It's the kind of thing that's constrained, and that was kind of the prototype of constrained supply for them. They started playing with the Blue Dials a few years ago and started tapering those.
Well, even a few years ago, a Blue Dial watch like that, the biggest question was most people a few years ago were probably getting a pretty good price on an AP 15400. So they really had to ask themselves, is it worth paying the difference for the blue? And you know what? You had a lot of people that ended up with the silver and the black, and every blue moon, you met somebody that said, screw it, I'm going to go to the boutique, I'm going to pay retail, and I'm going to buy the Blue Dial. And I love that, because at the end of the day, if you want the blue watch, just buy the blue watch. And it was really nice, again, that they really only had them at the boutiques. I'm a retailer, so it sucks that we don't have the Blue Dials. But at the end of the day, like, I get it. I get why they made the decision. And if no retailers can have it, then it is what it is.
And I'm a pre-owned guy, so I'm happy that when we have it, we can charge above list because there's no wait. Let me also answer a question that keeps coming up in our chat box about JLC Mecha Quartz Caliber 630s. These were movements that were designed in the late 80s and mostly marketed from the late 80s through early 90s. It was a 25-jewel combination of an actual mechanical chronograph module on top of a JLC ultra-thin quartz base caliber. Yes, they have a lot of horological value. To answer the original question, they're nicely made, they're watchmaker assembled and tuned and serviced, and they have a long service life. They can last decades. So whether you get one of the JLCs featuring that movement or one of the IWCs that use the same caliber, they are good, legitimate, long-term purchases that will hold you in good stead, be endlessly serviceable, and you can pass them down to your kid. Other question from Nana Odoro, longtime viewer. Nana Odoro asks, Tim, Rolex Daytona 116500 LN, that's the ceramic steel Daytona, or Vacheron Constantin overseas chronograph, $49,150, the one with the red chronograph hands. Well, here's how I look at this. First of all, right now, if you want to buy that Rolex, you have to wait in line at a dealer to pay retail price, or you have to pay something like $18,000 over list by about like $6,000 to buy that watch right now. Here's the funny thing. The Vacheron you can buy right now for about $12,000, $12,500, which is the price of the Daytona. Its retail price is more like $21,000, $21,500 when that watch was new 2 years ago. So you're looking at a watch that went from over $20,000 to about $12,000, and you're looking at a watch that's also a steel chronograph, also 100 meters plus water resistant, also a vertical clutch, column wheel movement, and auto. One went from 12 to 18, you're going to pay over list. One went from 21 to 12. To me, this is a no-brainer. Go with your heart and get the Vacheron.
I think the Vacheron's a no-brainer right now.
It's less common, and B, you're getting a $21,000 watch for $12,000. That's a hand-finished case, bezel, bracelet. With the Rolex, you're getting something that is a near-perfect industrial product.
I mean, the Rolex, again, don't get me wrong, the Rolex is awesome. Like,
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, I think that the new Daytona was executed as good as it can get. I think that the Vacheron right now, price-wise, is undervalued. And ultimately, I think that it's really for them, as we've said in prior shows, a marketing issue. And that if they, again, had a couple great launches and got their probably, figured things out a little bit in the direction and who they are, a little bit more, I think that that's a watch that goes from being a $12,000 watch to an $18,000 watch. So, as the overseas picks up, it gets more out there. Vacheron starts doing better, which it will. It's all time. It's a bell curve. Some watches do worse while some do better, and vice versa. But I think that right now happens to be a good time to get the Vacheron.
Oh, yeah.
And if you can't get the Daytona at retail, not the best time to get the Daytona.
I'm going to add this, that Generation 2 Overseas with the Grand Date. That is a watch that is getting two bumps. One is the general bump in the fortunes of the Overseas. The Generation 3 Overseas has finally started selling after a year of balancing inventory versus demand. So that watch has word on the street, word of mouth, and some buzz. That's picking up the demand for all older Overseas. Second, people are now saying, oh, wait, the Overseas Chrono is a $30,000 watch. Damn. And they're going back and they're looking at the Generation 2 watch, which many consider in chronograph form to be more attractive than the new reference. I love that big date. 5500.
I like the location of the date. I actually, I love the functionality of the new one. I love, the adjustability of the strap to the bracelet, to the buckle.
And it's nice to see the movement,
Yeah, it's great to see the movement. Again, I like that it's in-house. Is it the deal breaker for me? No, because at the end of the day, it doesn't bother me. But again, I have a deep stream, so I have the steel and titanium version of the watch on the rubber strap, and to me, I think it's one of the best watches that Vacheron's ever made.
Yeah, remember, guys, you own a Vacheron Constantin Overseas chronograph. People are not going to say, oh, well, that's the second generation versus the third. You can pick up for $12,000 a watch, full boxes, papers, accessories, and if necessary, service history, and you can wear that Overseas on your wrist. It's a fantastic handmade watch. Or you can go out, you can pay $30,000 for a new one, and you'll be able to say, I have a Vacheron Constantin Overseas Chrono. What's the practical difference once it's on your wrist? Well, one of them is going to leave money for like two other really nice watches. So I would say the decision's a no-brainer unless you're a total movement snob, in which case I still have to say the second gen, that Frederic Piguet, ask Alain, that's a great movement.
But no, so great questions from the chat. I love how how robust it is tonight.
Yeah, guys, thanks for joining us in.
Yeah.
I got some eye candy for you to close out tonight. This is possibly, next to the Alain Silberstein, second most interesting watch on the table. Michel Parmigiani's first model line, the Parmigiani Fleurier Toric, and the first Toric Tourbillon from the early 2000s in full platinum with beautiful specular finished mirrored rounded tourbillon bridge and filigree style tourbillon cage, hand wound, javelin hands, hand finished, 3-day power reserve. Folks, it does not get any better than this. This is why I love to tout the miracle of pre-owned watches. This watch for under $50 is not cheap, but it is a bargain. compared to what went into making this thing, the excruciating process that took longer than building a house, this is an incredible opportunity for someone with an open mind and no brand snobbery. Will it be you? Check it out on the watch box.
Yeah, so I mean, again, you know, real quick, I mean, Parmigiani, I think, is another brand that's really undervalued in the market. He produces beautiful things. I think that, again, it's probably, you know, down to marketing, right? The watches are gorgeous. It's actually the only manufacturer that Hermes will produce the straps for.
That's true.
Other than Hermes.
Full disclosure, Hermes is a stakeholder in Vaucher Manufacture, which is Parmigiani's movement arm.
So, but thank you everybody for logging on. You know, we couldn't do this without you guys, and I hope that you guys join us next week. So, my name is Brian, this is Tim, and this is the Watch Insider.